Hello, everybody. I'm Pastor Steve, and it's so good to have you here at the Next Steps class. This will be Next Steps 1, Connecting with Our Church. And we're just glad to have you here at Life Change, period. Thanks for taking the time to invest, and I think you will be glad you came today. We've got a lot of stuff to provide for you. And to start us off, I want you to give us a little bit of information about yourself in the room. And so I don't know who you've got there and how many people are around the table or the tables. So there's a couple of things we'd like to ask you to do just for a couple of moments here. First of all, we'd like for you to give your name. And then we'd like for you to describe your family if you have a family. Then we'd like to ask you, what do you do? What do you spend most of your time doing? Is there a job? Or are you retired? Or are you a stay-at-home mom, which is that's a full-time job? How did you find out about Life Change, and how long have you been coming here? We love to hear those stories, and so if you'll just take just a couple of moments in the room, either around your table or around the room, and let us know how you came about coming to Life Change, and just tell us a little bit about yourselves, and then we'll get back to the notes. Well, I hope you enjoyed that process. Always love hearing stories about where people came from, what they're doing in life, and everybody does have a story. So just to let you know, we have hopefully you got a notebook with you, some notes for today, and don't be overwhelmed by that thickness of that notepad today. Probably half of that stuff is just to read for your information later on. So we're not going to cover all of that. We've got some fill in the blanks today, but you can read some of this other stuff in your own timing. So where are we headed with this? Well, just to let you know, this is step 1. We have 4 steps. Step 1 is about connecting with Life Change. And that can take on different levels of meaning to you, whether you want to join the church or just take another step of some other kind of connection with our church. We want you to know a little bit more about Life Change, and that's what today is all about. There's step 2, and that's discovering your design. you have a God-given design, and we're going to walk you through a lab next week in step 2 to learn more about that. Step 3 is about developing your leadership. Everybody's got some level of leadership. You influence somebody, and that makes a difference. And so we'll talk about that in step number 3. And then step 4, we're going to simply ask you to consider joining an impact team, a team where you can serve and make a difference. And so we'll talk about that in week 4, step 4. And I hope you'll be able to make it to all those other steps. Now, in the first part of your booklet, you'll see where we talk about the life change story. And one thing that may be surprising to you, you can read about this, we're not going to read it to you, is that Life Change is not an overnight church. Like, Life Change has been around for decades. In fact, we started back in 1923. And so it's got a rich history. There have been rich leaders through the years who've got us to where we're at today. And I'll tell you this, our message is the same since 1923. Now, our methods have changed somewhat, but it's not an overnight church. We've been around for a while, and God's doing some incredible things around here. And we'd love to have you be a part of the Life Change story. I want to pray for you, but I want to pray a prayer that Paul prayed for an early church. He prayed for this church of new believers in a place called Ephesus. And so I like what he included in that prayer in Ephesians chapter 1, beginning with verse 17. I'm giving you the Message paraphrase. He prayed this. He said, I ask the God of our Master, Jesus Christ, the God of glory, to make you intelligent and discerning in knowing Him, knowing God personally. And we believe that's one of the most important things about your spiritual journey, is knowing God personally. He goes on to say this, and that your eyes would be focused and clear so that you can see exactly what it is He is calling you to do, to grasp the immensity of this glorious way of life He has for His followers. He has a calling for you and for me. So we believe that knowing God personally is the most important thing. And then knowing that God has called you to something. You're not just here taking up space or breathing oxygen. He has a calling on your life. And we want to help you work through that and understand that so that you can live it out. So I want to pray for you right now as we get started. Father, I want to thank you for your goodness to us. Thank you for each person that's here today. And I thank you that you want us to know you personally. You're that kind of God. And I pray that every person would know Him in a personal relationship and that we would understand our calling. Because there's nothing more rewarding than to live out that sweet spot, that calling that you have for each one of us. And I just pray that you'll help us along, speak to us during next steps. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right. So we use the word journey a lot. We believe that everybody is on some kind of spiritual journey. And so we use those terms a lot. And that spiritual journey consists of at least 4 steps, 4 that we like to focus on. The first one I've already mentioned about, and that is we want everybody to know God. And that's not just a cerebral exercise. That's an actual relationship. It's not just a mental thing, but that you would know God in a personal way. That you would be able to say that I know that I am a follower of Jesus Christ. I know I'm going to heaven. And I know that God is crazy about me. That you would experience it in that way. The second thing is we would like for you to find freedom. Everybody's got stuff from their past that they're wrestling with. But in order to become more like Christ, sometimes we've got to work through the issues of our past and find that freedom. And we want to be able to help all of us find that type of freedom that Jesus wants us to have. The third area is for you to discover your purpose. And whether you join this church or not, you've got some particular kind of purpose God has in mind for you. And we want to help every person who's at Life Change discover their purpose. This next step process is just a way to do that. And then the fourth thing is this. Everybody wants to make a difference. In fact, Maslow's hierarchy of needs talks about all of our needs like security and food and shelter. Making a difference is a need, and we want to help people walk through that. We believe that's a part of their spiritual journey. So we're going to kind of walk through these and drill down a little bit into more specifics. We're going to go back to number 1, and that would be knowing God. Now, there are different ways to get to know God. One of the primary ways around here at Life Change is through Sunday services. Now, it's not the only way, but we believe our Sunday services don't just exist for us, but our Sunday services exist for the people we've not even met yet. The people who may even be far from God. We want to provide access for them to get to know who Jesus Christ is. And Sunday services are one of the ways to do that. And we believe that when God looks down at the church overall, He doesn't just see the worshipers, but He also is zoned in specifically for people who are far from Him. If you look at Luke chapter 15, there's a great chapter in the Bible that talks about a lost coin, a lost sheep and a lost son, and that there is partying in heaven when one of those is found. And so we have that same heart here at Life Change. We believe Sunday services are simply a way to facilitate people coming to know God. Now, there are 4 things that we do on Sunday that we as a strategy of feeding people. The first thing is celebration. We actually, this is kind of strange to you perhaps, we actually believe church, it ought to be fun. And we try to incorporate humor. We believe that church is supposed to be something that is enjoyed, not something that is endured. And when I was growing up, my parents drug me to church, and I don't know if you had the same story, but I just couldn't wait for it to get over with. Well, we want church to be one of the highlights of your week. There ought to be celebration. The second thing is this: there ought to be inspiration. This is not just a general meeting. This is not a TED Talk. It's not a lecture. We want you to experience God. We believe God is here when we come together and worship, and it's a God moment. And so we want people to come through here, certainly to be inspired by God. The third thing is preparation. We try to give you a message on Sunday mornings that you can use on Mondays or Wednesdays or Thursday afternoons. We believe that practicality is an important part of God's Word. It's not meant to be a boring thing. It ought to be able to help you. That's what the purpose of God's Word is. The fourth thing is this: salvation. Our church services are designed for people to understand who Jesus is and come into a saving relationship with Jesus. And if we have any other purpose for our meetings, and salvation is not the purpose of our coming together, then I would hesitate to call us a church. Jesus himself said that he came to seek and save the lost. And that's certainly our mission today. So what does this have to do with you and with me? One of those is that we actually can play a role in helping people cross the line of faith. How do we share Christ with others? First of all, we accept the personal responsibility. That every one of us, we do have a responsibility. We have a sphere of influence. We have certain family members God's placed us with. We have certain relationships that we have, that God has put us uniquely in those situations. We have certain jobs, and we have certain colleagues at work. And your intersection with some of the people that you're in are not by accident, but God perhaps has put you in place for a reason. We all have that responsibility. We're all ambassadors. The second thing is we invite people to build a relationship, a personal relationship with other people. People want to know that you actually care. And we're not talking about some kind of spiritual project. They're not lab rats for us, for the church, but that you actually would care for people. The people that, even maybe the people that you don't care for, to care for those neighbors and the people that you work with and spend some time with them. The third thing is this: that you would learn to be able to share your personal story with them. Now, some people may think, well, I have to give the Bible, I have to read all these Bible verses, or I have to know all this theology. And I would tell you, no, you don't. In fact, a lot of times, beating people over the head with a Bible and a bunch of Bible verses doesn't work anyway. But one thing you do have that no one can argue with, and it's uniquely yours, and that is your story. And every one of us has a personal story about how we came to faith in God. Some people's stories are very dramatic. Other people's, like mine, very simple, almost kind of like boring. But it is uniquely mine. And God can use that to influence other people. The fourth thing is this: we invite you to give a personal invitation, to simply invite that person. Now, you may be comfortable with leading that person to Christ, and that's totally fine. But a lot of people are not comfortable with doing that. So we just simply say, invite them to church. We'll do that for you. You do what you can do in your relationships, and we'll do what we can do on our end to help that person and nudge them toward Jesus. And so it really is a partnership. Now, who are we actually responsible for at Life Change? The Bible says in Acts chapter 1, verse 8, Jesus was launching the first church. He said this: "You will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and all Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth." So this kind of highlights kind of who we're responsible for. The first level of that is we're responsible for Jerusalem. And for us in Burnups, that would be our community, our communities. We're a small village, and so we're not just, we feel like we're called not just to reach Burnups, but we're called to make a difference in Dorr, in Hamilton, in Allegan, in Hopkins, Jamestown, Overijssel. We have a bunch of communities that kind of fall under what we feel is our responsibility and our privilege. The second sphere of influence we have is in Judea and Samaria. This would be considered our region and nation. that we get to make a difference in this thing. We are a part of a thing called the Wesleyan Church, and we actually have a district that we align ourselves with, and that district is made up of the state of Michigan, the state of Wisconsin, and the state of Illinois. So it's kind of geographical, and we get to play a role in some church planting initiatives and supporting other churches in those areas, and that's a privilege for us to be able to do. The third thing is we get to make a difference in the ends of the earth. That would be our world. We get to support missionaries in Ecuador, Mongolia, Nepal, Haiti, Mexico. People around the world are being able to reach for the gospel, and we get to play a role right here from Burnups. And so we kind of consider that certainly a part of our responsibility. So how do we participate? How do we get from the watching level to the participation level? The first thing we would say is this. You can pray. You can start to pray for that person that you know who may need Jesus. Maybe they're far from God, and maybe you work with them and you've noticed them through the years, or maybe it's a family member and you've got a family gathering coming up, and that maybe God would use that moment, or that neighbor that you have across the street. You can begin to pray for people to get saved at our services on Sunday mornings. We would love for you. We can't have too many prayers that you would pray, because that's really our goal on Sunday mornings. We want people ultimately to come to a knowledge of Jesus. If you would help us to pray, that would be significant. And then certainly pray for our other efforts around the region and around the world, the efforts that we have. The second thing you can do is you can actually give. I'm not just talking finances, although that's a part of it. I'm talking about giving with your time, giving of your talents, your skill sets. And then the third area is this. Maybe you are called to go. And maybe for you, going is going on a mission trip to another continent or another hemisphere. But maybe for you, going is simply going to your colleague at work and inviting them out to coffee and just listening to their story and investing in them. So we encourage you to take a role here, whether you're a member of our church or not, that you can make a difference in participating. Okay, so the spiritual journey consists of knowing God, and then the second part of that is we want everybody to find freedom. And one of the greatest ways we know to find freedom is this idea of a life group. We want people to get into something smaller. As our church gets bigger, as our church gets larger, everybody needs to become a part of something that's smaller. And in fact, people come to me sometimes and say, well, Pastor, I can't get to know everybody. You don't need to know everybody, but you need to know a few people. And in fact, everybody's not going to be known by everybody, but we want everybody to be known by somebody. And one of the ways that you can do that is actually get in a life group. Here's what a life group's going to offer you. A life group's going to offer you a place to connect with others. See, a church will feel too big if you don't know anyone else. And by the way, I find that, honestly, some of the best friends I've ever had are in the context of a small group or a life group. I'll see people here on Sundays, and I'm wondering, they're having a great time in conversation. I'm wondering, how do they know that person? Oh, they're in a life group together. They've lived some life together. And so we'll let you be as anonymous as you want to be, but at some point in time, we want you to know circles are better than rows. Take a risk. Even if you're an introvert, get to know somebody. The second thing is this. A life group is a good place to protect each other. We all walk through circumstances in life. We all have struggles. And I need someone to come alongside me to encourage me. And God could allow you to walk along somebody else on their journey, pray for them, and encourage them along the way. We all need that support, that accountability. And the third thing is this. A life group is a place to grow together. It's a place to grow together. We don't want you just to get smart about the word on Sunday morning. We say that Sunday mornings is about proclamation, but the life group is actually about application. It's applying what you've learned. And so we may challenge you, hey, what it was that pastor said on Sunday mornings, how is that impacting you today? And so life group becomes a venue to have some of those conversations. Now, a couple of things to know about life groups. You maybe have been in small groups in other places before, but we want you to know this about our small groups. First of all, the small groups that we have here, they're called life groups. They're primarily about relationships, not information. We're not against information. We're not against studying the Bible. You will open your Bible from time to time in those groups, but it's not a cerebral moment. This is not meant to be a think tank. Our goal is not to get you smarter in the life group. Our goal is to get you relating to other people, because it's in the context of relationships that we find life change best happens. The second thing is this. Our life groups, they're not eternal. They're not long-term commitments. We have semesters, and those semesters are about 10 to 12 weeks each. And you can get into a life group for 10 to 12 weeks, And then we take a break because we recognize the rhythms of people. We need breaks from time to time. And then if you want to join another life group at the next sign up, it's totally legal, totally accepted that you can get off and get out of one group and try another one. And thank goodness they don't last to infinity and beyond. It's a short-term commitment. The third thing is this: anyone can actually lead a life group. I mean, seriously, you don't have to be a Bible scholar. You don't have to be a theologian. We would love to have you lead a life group. I mean, obviously, we have some standards in place about your faith and that you have a relationship with Christ and you have you're in a stable season of your life. But relationships are the key here. It's more about leading people in relationships and facilitating relationships. You're not teaching. We'll provide you the curriculum, or we'll provide you the resources. We'll provide you coaching and training. But it's really, we just ask you to care for the other people. Okay, so our spiritual journey, knowing God, finding freedom, and then discovering your purpose. Discovering your purpose is an important part of that. My clicker is actually stuck. Oh, there we go. Discovering a purpose. Next steps. That's what you're doing today. You're actually doing that in next steps. Step 1, connect with Life Change. We've talked about that. Step 2, that'll be next week, discovering your design. Step 3, develop your leadership. And step 4, in the 4th week, we want to encourage you to join an impact team. And then the 4th area is we want you to make a difference. That's the 4th goal in your spiritual journey. We want to help you make a difference. The Bible says that we're all ministers. Everybody is a minister. It's not just the pastor's job to make a difference. And in fact, it makes church a whole lot more fun when you can make a difference in other people's lives. Now, I want to talk to you just for a moment about this phrase called church accountability. And just to let you know, this is sometimes surprising to people, we're actually a member of a denomination. It's the Wesleyan Church. It's a small denomination. I'll talk a little bit about what that means later. But a lot of your packet today has information about our beliefs. We're not going to go over those specifically. You can read those in your own time. But if you want to know more about the Wesleyan denomination, I invite you to go on the website to wesleyan.org, and you can learn more about the things that our denomination is all about, our values, and what we're all about, and our structure. And there's plenty of videos and things to capture and learn about our denomination. So let's talk a little bit about Wesleyan trivia. If you want to fill in the blank, we're going to walk through this kind of fast. Our name comes from the 18th century preacher, scholar, John Wesley. That's probably not a surprise to you. He never was a Wesleyan, but he inspired us as a denomination. The Wesleyan Church is actually connected to the Methodist Church originally, so we're a branch off of the Methodist Church family. The Wesleyan Church is a 1968 merger between two smaller denominations, the Pilgrim Holiness denomination and the Wesleyan Methodist Church. They came together, these two little tiny denominations, to form the Wesleyan Church in 1968, over 50 years ago. Our church, Life Change, was originally a Pilgrim Holiness church, yet down the road, south of us, is Diamond Springs. That church was a Wesleyan Methodist church. And so now we're all part of the same Wesleyan church family. There are other church groups that are similar to us in doctrine. You may have heard some of those. Free Methodists. The Nazarenes are a fairly good-sized denomination. The Churches of Christ and Christian Union, very small. The Church of God of Anderson, very small, and not to be confused with other churches of God. And then there's the Salvation Army. Many people are surprised to find that they are actually a church. They're known for their social efforts and their humanitarian and charitable work, but they actually are a church denomination, and we're very much similar to them in our doctrine. Now, when it comes to numbers, we have about 1,700 churches in North America. We have about 5,000 churches across the globe. And on any given Sunday morning, we have about 475,000 people worshiping in a Wesleyan church on a Sunday morning. Of course, this number is a moving target, but that's kind of a general ballpark. We're still a very small denomination. Now, the Wesleyan denomination was founded primarily as a response to some social issues, the primary one being the issue of slavery. And this happened in 1843. Earliest beginnings were in that year, 1843, and there were actually some Methodist bishops who apparently had some slaves, and there were a group of people who said, we don't agree with that. And they broke off to form what is known now as the Wesleyan Church over slavery. There were some other issues involved, women's rights, and then some child labor atrocities were an important cause for some of the people in the early opening and starting of this denomination. You can skip number 9. It's kind of a mess up on my part. I have a number 9 here. But number 10 is the same one. We are one of the first denominations in America to ordain a woman. And that's different for some people. We certainly value and champion women in leadership. We find that even throughout the Bible, women made a huge difference in the kingdom effort. The Old Testament, of course, there was the prophetess, the New Testament, the prophetess Anna. There was a judge in the Old Testament named Deborah. Women have played an incredible role in the kingdom of God since the beginning of time, and we as the denomination love to recognize and support women in leadership. And they make a huge difference. Even in our church, we're glad to have women involved. When it comes to location, our home office is way down south in Indianapolis. That's where a lot of the superintendents and other people, the officers, live, and that's where they work, and that's where they have their meetings. We have churches in more than 90 countries around the world. And then at the local level, as I mentioned, we have a subdivided district in our area. It's a geographic thing of Michigan, Wisconsin, and Illinois, and we form what is known as the Great Lakes region. Now, there's this thing called church government. Believe it or not, we actually have a government. You wouldn't notice that necessarily on Sunday morning, but you'd see the impact of that. So a couple of things about Life Change Church when it comes to governing. We are governed by a local church board. Our local church board is elected by you, the members of our church, and they kind of are in charge of making the major decisions throughout the year. Because we don't have church meetings every single month to make all these decisions, we let the church board that you elect make those decisions. The ministry decisions are led by the pastoral staff. So the church oversees and governs us. The local board governs us, but the pastors lead for the ministry purposes, but we're accountable to that local church board, who's ultimately accountable to the congregation here. And then we have what is known as a congregational form of government. And that congregational form of government just simply means that the congregation ultimately decides who the leaders are going to be. We're not force-fed by some hierarchy in some other city somewhere, or they don't come down from the Vatican to tell us what to do, okay? We are accountable to them, but you get to choose your own church leadership team. You get to choose your own pastor in most cases. And so it's a congregational form of government where the congregation votes. Now, the biggest decisions at this church are typically made by the congregation at what we call an annual church conference or annual church celebration. This often happens, it typically happens around the third Sunday in May. And we invite both members and non-members to attend this, and that's where you're going to vote on certain things. Our pastors, just so you know this, are licensed by our denomination. And then there's a higher level of calling beyond licensing called ordination. They're ordained. And our ordination is under the spiritual authority of the Wesleyan Church. I have my credentials with the denomination, and every year, if I behave myself and I fulfill the calling, they award me my credentials for another year. If I mess up, or I commit moral failure, or I go rogue, they have the right to pull my license. So I am accountable to them, and I certainly welcome that. Our local church board is elected each year at the annual church celebration. Our church board actually right now has 7 members. I am a member as a lead pastor. We have a secretary who keeps up with the minutes and decisions that are made. We have a church treasurer who provides monthly financial reports. We have a trustee. We have a trustee board, but there's a representative from that trustee board on our regular church board. And this person is responsible for a lot of the decisions that are made about our property and our resources here. And then we have 3 at-large members. And those are 3-year terms, and they stagger. So these people meet every month to make important decisions. You have a chairman of the board, and that's the lead pastor. That would be me. It's not really that fancy of a title. We have a vice chairman. That's a layperson on that board. So in my absence, the vice chairman can help make decisions. So we meet together usually about once a month. Now, here's a topic. If you want to turn to page 18, it's the topic that some people either love or they hate, and that's the topic of church finances. And just to kind of let you know, we have 3 main targets when we have giving our finances. And you'll see these mostly every Sunday morning in our bulletin. You can see these phrases. There's 3 main targets. The first target is this, the general fund. And just kind of let you know, the general fund is our main operating fund. It's from the general fund that we fund our ministries. We fund everything from buying children's curriculum. It's where we pay the salaries of all the employees. It's where we pay for the light bill and the power bill and the heating. We pay the mortgage out of the operational budget, the general fund. And so when you give to the general fund, and we certainly encourage you to consider a level of giving to that, that's what makes the difference around here. We have a second level of giving, and this is what is called Faith Promise. And this is really for our local and global missions. This is totally separate from our operating budget. It's totally, again, it's like all of our giving. There's nothing mandatory here. But the Faith Promise, we just simply challenge people once a year to consider, what would God have you give beyond your regular general fund giving to support local and global missions? And so all of our missions giving happens in a separate bucket. It's all voluntary, and it's called Faith Promise. The third area is kind of a relatively new area. It's called Making Room. It's an initiative we started a few years ago, and it was actually to help pay for this room that we're in right now. We recognized we needed to make more room. That there were generations prior to us that helped build a building back in the 50s, and it's now time for us to step up to the plate and look into our giving at a sacrificial level. And so many of you here today, many of the people in our congregation have been giving over the last couple of years in a really deeper level of sacrifice so that we could actually make room for more and more people in our community to come to know Jesus. And we needed to have some more space. We were just simply running out. And so perhaps God will challenge you and perhaps consider giving to Making Room. But you'll see these three topics in the bulletin on a regular basis and how the funding is happening around here. We do believe in a 10% tithe. It's really kind of a minimum standard actually in the Bible. But our real goal is generosity. We encourage everyone to go to God and just simply say, God, what would you have me do? It's not legalism. We never come to you with a gun to your head and say, where's your money? We're not that kind of church. And if you've been here around for a while, you can see that we're just incredibly generous. And we just love to be able to make a difference and give. We certainly require a 10% tithe for our pastors. And we require 10% for those that are on the board. And it would make sense if that you would have some skin in the game if you're going to make decisions about the people's money, that you are tithing regularly, that you do have some skin in the game. But for other people, we don't require that. We simply challenge folks, just give what you can. And maybe if you're at a 2% giving level, 2% of what you bring in to give to the church, then maybe next year you want to stretch and incrementally go to 3%. And let's see if God won't bless you and challenge you in that way. But again, no legalism here. Our church fiscal year runs from June until May. So we don't do a calendar year. It's June until May, the way our budget goes. And our budget is ultimately voted on in May at that annual church conference for the coming year. Our monthly financial reports are created and reviewed each month in our board meetings. If you would like a copy of that monthly report, you're totally entitled to it, whether you're a member or not. Just let our secretary know. We can make that report available to you upon request. So what are we asking people to do, and why are we asking them to be a member? Why would you even care about membership? Can I just come to this church and just be a part of it without joining? And my answer to that is absolutely yes. You do not have to join. We do believe that membership has an important role, but our number one moniker isn't that we're Wesleyan. Our number one moniker is that we're a people who have a faith in Jesus Christ, and that's what we care about the most. But we certainly want to challenge you to consider that next level of commitment here. So why membership? Can I just come here? And I would say yes. In fact, I hope you notice that we treat everybody the same. We love you whether you're a member or not. Members don't have a special parking space. Members don't get to sit in first class while everybody else sits in coach. Everybody is on equal footing here. We love everybody here. I mean, it's not a big deal for us if people are not a member. But here's a couple of thoughts about membership that may help you understand why membership does matter. First of all, it provides a way to identify the stakeholders. It's a way to identify who's on board. For publicly traded companies, if they have to get together on Wall Street and make important decisions, they don't just call the general public to say, hey, vote on this. They ask for the people who have skin in the game. And so they've identified stakeholders. That's who comes and makes those decisions. And so church membership kind of helps us identify those stakeholders. Who's entitled to make those decisions? Secondly, it gives you the opportunity and a voice in some of the critical decisions that impact the church. It allows you to vote on the budget. It allows you to vote on who's on the leadership team. It allows you to even sometimes vote for the pastor. From time to time, that vote will come up. Here's another way to think about it. I've known of some churches where they didn't require membership to vote on the pastor. And so a cult in the local community finds out that they're voting on this pastor tonight, And so the cult comes and they vote against the pastor because they didn't like him. They didn't like his teaching. And so because the church didn't have a way to identify stakeholders, it was the outsiders who actually made the decision for the local church. And so stakeholders are boundaries. It kind of lets us know who's on board. And then the third thing is this. It's a way of you asking for accountability in your spiritual growth. We have a lot of people coming and going, Life Change. We have a lot of people kicking the tires and checking us out, and we certainly welcome that. But we don't always know who's on board with us and who's not. And so membership just allows a way to see who's actually on the team. And sometimes we see people for a few months, and then other times we never see them for months on end, and we find out, they're at their other church. They have a second church. Sometimes we don't even know how to care for people if they're balancing between a couple different churches. And so it really just helps us to say, are you on board? Is this your church home? Am I your pastor? And by becoming a member, you're identifying us as your home and us as your pastors. And it kind of just helps us to know. You're just saying, hey, I want you to help me with my discipleship journey. I want you to hold me accountable in my faith journey. I'm not looking to some other church to do that. It's going to be you. You're my home. And so that's why we think membership is kind of a big deal. Now, when we're asking people to become a member, what are we asking them to do? I like the word partner, because member is kind of like what have you done for me lately? But a partner is kind of a reciprocal relationship. We have a membership covenant that consists of 4 things. The first one is this. We ask you to protect the unity of the church. That you would just simply, as a member, you would act in love toward other people. There's a good biblical principle. We would ask that you would not gossip about other people. That you would respect the authority of the leaders in the local church. And that you wouldn't do something to try to subvert the authority of the leaders in the local church. You would follow the leaders. Now, we're not asking you to follow them blindly, as in like a cult or something. We're open to be challenged, and we invite you to critique us and challenge us where we need to grow and change. But again, unity of the church is a high value for us. The second thing is this. We will ask you to share the responsibility of the church. We would ask you to pray for its growth, pray for the church's health, invite unchurched people to attend. This is all of our responsibility and privilege. And then warmly welcome people who come. Even if you're not on the First Impressions team or the guest services team, if there's somebody around you, just take responsibility, take initiative, and welcome them. Let them know that you're glad they're here. We'd love for you to be a part of that. The third thing is this. We ask you to serve, to get on an impact team, to actually serve. You would discover your spiritual purpose. That's one of the reasons we have Next Steps. That you would find out how to make a difference. That's another reason we have Next Steps. And then just develop a servant's heart. We love to serve around here, and it's really a we thing. It is definitely not a me thing. It's not about me. It's about other people, and that's a great value that we have around here at Life Change. And then the fourth thing we would ask you is to support the mission and testimony of my church. We would ask you, no surprise here, to actively worship here. That if you're going to call this your church family and your church home, that we would love to see you here on a regular basis and get in a life group faithfully. That you would connect and say, hey, I'm going to rearrange my priorities in life, and I'm going to make church a high priority for me and my family. We would ask that you would give regularly. Again, where God leads you, we're not heavy-handed with this, but give regularly to this local church and this mission. And then we would simply ask that you would live a godly, a Christ-like life. That how you live impacts the testimony of our church. It speaks of our church, how you live. Other people see that. And so keep that in mind as you support the mission and testimony of our church. Okay, so next steps. What are we asking you to do today? That would be on page 30. The first thing is we want you to nail it down. And what we mean by that is we want you to have a saving relationship with Jesus Christ. Not simply to believe in Him, not simply to know Him, but that you receive Him in a relationship and that you know where you stand with God. And that's way more important than anything I've talked about today. It's certainly more important about church membership or anything or serving is that you would actually know Him in a personal relationship. And if you want to talk to somebody after this meeting today, we would love to help you take that next step. The second thing is this. Decide on your level of commitment at Life Change. Whether you'd like to join, you don't have to join, but we're going to make the form available for you to do that. Or certainly gather in a life group at a regular basis. Find a serving team. We want you to figure out what is your next step in committing. I'm going to say that word again, life group. It's a big deal to us. You need to get in something smaller. Again, you don't have to be a member here, but circles are better than rows. And so find that life group. Sign up the next time we have the sign-ups. And then number 4, let me encourage you to show up next week for the next step, okay? Step 2, step 3, step 4. We'd love to have you be a part of those 4 steps. Again, I want to thank you so much for your incredible time. Your time is valuable to us, and we're so glad to have you here as a part of Life Change. Now, I'm going to turn it over to our host today. We have a form that we'd like for you to fill out, and the form has your information, just some stuff about you so that we have your information. And then if you'd like to join this church, there's some places that you can acknowledge that, or you can wait and join later on. We'll just make that available for you. But thank you again so much for taking the time to invest today. God bless you.